The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the sound of 17 different species trying to figure out how to diplomatically say what the hell in their respective languages. Ambassador Vextar of the Crystalline Confederation stood at the central podium, his translucent body flickering with agitated purple light as he shuffled through a stack of data tablets that clinked like wind chimes. Esteemed colleagues, Vextar began, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone about to ruin everyone's day with paperwork. We have encountered what I can only describe as a taxonomic nightmare. Councillor Glubb, representing the Aquatic Alliance, nervously adjusted his breathing apparatus. Water sloshed audibly in his environmental suit as he shifted in his chair. Oh no, please tell me it's not another one of those worlds where the plants are carnivorous and the rocks are alive. Worse, Vextar announced, projecting a holographic display that showed two conflicting database entries. We have discovered a species that has simultaneously achieved classification as both harmless civilian population and apex predator species. The first in galactic history. General Thrak, whose beetle-like exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's lights, clicked his mandibles dismissively. Impossible. Our classification system has been in use for 3,000 years. No species can be both harmless and deadly. Tell that to the humans, Vextar replied, his crystalline form now pulsing an alarming shade of orange. According to our initial surveys, they're a peaceful species that grows flowers, cares for small animals and creates art. Simultaneously, they're the only species we've encountered that actively seeks out dangerous environments for recreational purposes. Councillor Glubb's tentacles writhed nervously. What do you mean by recreational purposes? Vextar consulted his notes. They voluntarily climb vertical rock faces without mechanical assistance. They intentionally expose themselves to harmful solar radiation while lying motionless for hours. They consume capsaicin, a compound that causes pain, and consider this enjoyable. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle humming of the environmental systems and Councillor Glubb's increasingly rapid breathing. Furthermore, Vextar continued, clearly enjoying his role as harbinger of bureaucratic doom, they keep predatory animals in their homes as companions. They regularly venture into wilderness areas populated by creatures that could kill them, and they call this camping. They've been observed jumping out of perfectly functional aircraft for entertainment. General Thrak's compound eyes focused intently on the data. What's their military capability? That's where it gets complicated, Vextar admitted, his light shifting to a queasy yellow-green. They don't appear to have a formal warrior caste. Their military is composed of ordinary civilians who volunteer for duty. Yet these same civilians routinely engage in activities that would qualify as advanced survival training for our special forces. So they're all soldiers pretending to be civilians? Glubb asked hopefully. No, they're all civilians who happen to be capable of soldier-level survival skills, apparently by accident. The silence stretched longer this time, broken only by the sound of 17 different species trying to process information that broke their fundamental understanding of how intelligent life was supposed to work. Finally, Councillor Glubb spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. What do we do? Vextar's form brightened to a decisive blue. We've requested a diplomatic meeting. A human representative should arrive within the hour. Perhaps direct observation will help us determine which classification is correct. General Thrak leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his armored weight. And if they turn out to be the deadly predators, then we'll know not to underestimate them, Vextar replied. And if they're truly harmless civilians, then we'll know our classification system needs a complete overhaul, Glubb finished miserably. The chamber's main screen flickered to life, showing an incoming shuttle request. Vextar's crystalline body went completely transparent for a moment, before returning to its normal opacity. Well, he announced. I suppose we're about to find out. The shuttle that docked at Base 7 was not what the Galactic Council had expected. Instead of the sleek diplomatic vessel they'd anticipated, or perhaps a battle-scarred military transport, they got what appeared to be a civilian cargo hauler held together with prayer and what humans called duct tape. Did their ship just make that noise? Councillor Glubb asked, his tentacles pressed against the observation window as smoke drifted from the shuttle's exhaust ports. I believe it's supposed to do that, Vextar replied. Though his crystalline form had gone a worried shade of amber, the human filed a flight plan indicating they performed their own mechanical repairs en route. General Thrak's mandibles clicked nervously. They repair their own spacecraft, while in flight. Apparently it's standard practice. Vextar consulted his notes. The repair log mentions something called percussive maintenance and turning it off and on again. The airlock hissed open and out stepped Margaret O'Brien, looking exactly like what she was, a 68-year-old retired kindergarten teacher who had accidentally become Earth's first galactic diplomat because she'd been in the right place at the wrong time and had actually read the job posting. She wore a sensible cardigan, comfortable walking shoes, and carried what appeared to be a hand-knitted bag. Her gray hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she had the kind of smile that suggested she'd spent decades dealing with creatures that were small, unreasonable, and prone to tantrums. "Hello there," Maggie said cheerfully, waving at the reception committee. "I hope I'm not late. Had a bit of trouble with the hyperdrive, but nothing a good whack with a wrench couldn't fix." The three alien representatives stood frozen. This was neither the hardened warrior nor the helpless civilian they'd prepared for. This was something entirely outside their experience. Ambassador O'Brien, Vexstar managed, his form flickering between confused colors. "Welcome to the Galactic Council Station. I am Ambassador Vexstar. This is Counselor Glubb, and General Thrak." "Oh, please just call me Maggie," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "And thank you for the lovely invitation. I brought cookies." She reached into her bag and produced a tin that looked suspiciously homemade. General Thrak took an involuntary step backward. "Cookies, chocolate chip. Made them myself this morning." "Well, Earth morning. Time zones are tricky out here, aren't they?" Maggie opened the tin, releasing a smell that was completely foreign to alien olfactory systems but somehow universally appealing. Counselor Glubb's breathing apparatus fogged up. You manufactured food items in your personal dwelling." "Oh yes, I love to cook. Been doing it for 40 years. You learn to make do with what you have. Last week I had to improvise a cake for my granddaughter's birthday. We were out of eggs, so I used applesauce and flax seeds. Turned out better than expected." The three aliens exchanged glances. The casual mention of chemical substitution in food preparation was setting off alarm bells in their heads. "You perform your own food chemistry?" Vexstar asked carefully. "Well, I wouldn't call it chemistry exactly." Maggie laughed. "Though I suppose baking is just chemistry you can eat. I also grow my own vegetables. Nothing like fresh tomatoes from your own garden. Of course you have to watch out for the hornworms. Nasty little things, but they're not too bad once you know how to deal with them." "Deal with them?" General Thrak's voice had gone up an octave. "Oh, you just pick them off by hand. They're bigger than your thumb, but they're not aggressive. Now the raccoons. Those are trickier. Had one get into my garbage last month. Clever little things, raccoons. They can open latches and remember solutions to problems. Had to install a new locking mechanism." Maggie continued chatting pleasantly while the aliens tried to process the information that she casually interacted with wild animals that were apparently intelligent enough to solve puzzles and infiltrate secured areas. "And of course there's the usual home maintenance. Fixed my roof last spring after that big storm. 30-foot ladder, no problem. Used to be afraid of heights, but you get over it when you need to. Same with the plumbing. Amazing what you can accomplish with the right tools and a YouTube tutorial. You ascend to dangerous elevations and perform structural modifications to your dwelling." Vexstar was now cycling through colors that weren't in his species' normal emotional spectrum. "Oh, that's nothing. Last year I helped my neighbor move. Carried a refrigerator up 2 flights of stairs. Well, me and Bill from next door. That's teamwork for you. Bill's 83, but he's still got it." Counselor Glubb made a sound that might have been whimpering. "Your elderly population engages in heavy lifting. Well, you do what needs doing," Maggie said matter-of-factly. "Can't just sit around waiting for someone else to handle everything. That's not how we were raised." The implications of this statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. An entire species raised to be self-sufficient. An entire species that considered dangerous activities to be routine maintenance. "I brought some photos," Maggie added helpfully, pulling out a device. "Would you like to see pictures of my grandchildren? Little Emma just learned to ride a bike without training wheels. And here's Tommy at summer camp. They're learning to build fires and identify edible plants." The aliens stared at images of small humans being taught survival skills as recreational activities. "Fascinating," Vexstar managed weakly. "Perhaps we should begin the formal proceedings." The council chamber had been rearranged to accommodate what Vexstar optimistically called diplomatic evidence review and what everyone else recognized as an intervention. Maggie sat comfortably in the witness chair, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she worked on what appeared to be a scarf. The sound was oddly hypnotic and deeply unsettling to species that didn't understand why someone would voluntarily manipulate sharp metal objects. "Ambassador O'Brien," Vexstar began, his form now a steady nervous yellow. "We've prepared a presentation of human activities that we've observed through your global communications network. Perhaps you could help us understand what we're seeing." "Oh, how wonderful," Maggie said, not looking up from her knitting. I do love educational programs. Would anyone like a cookie? They're getting cold. The three aliens had unanimously decided that accepting food from a human was potentially suicidal, but they were too polite to say so directly. The first holographic display showed a human cooking show. The host was cheerfully explaining how to properly brown meat while wielding what appeared to be several weapons. This individual, Vexstar explained, demonstrates advanced knowledge of thermal application to organic proteins, precision blade work and chemical timing reactions. Our military analysts classify this as advanced combat preparation. Maggie glanced up and smiled. Oh, that's just Gordon Ramsay. He's a bit dramatic, but he knows his way around a kitchen. Though I don't care for all the shouting. When I taught kindergarten we used indoor voices. Indoor voices? General Thurk inquired. You know, speaking quietly when you're inside. Basic manners. Though Gordon probably had to shout to be heard over the camera equipment. Maggie's needles never paused. I've been cooking longer than he's been alive. Nothing fancy, mind you. Practical food. Meat and potatoes. Casseroles. Things that stick to your ribs. The aliens exchanged glances. She spoke of thermal protein preparation with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather. The next display showed a nature documentary. Humans were hiking through what was clearly hostile terrain, identifying plants and animal tracks with expert precision. Here we observe humans conducting reconnaissance in dangerous environments, Vexstar continued. Note their ability to identify potential food sources and threats through minimal visual cues. This suggests extensive survival training. Oh, that's just camping, Maggie said cheerfully. Though they're being a bit overly cautious, aren't they? You can tell those are experienced hikers by their gear. Good boots, proper packs. I used to take my kids camping every summer when they were little. Nothing teaches you self-reliance like spending a weekend with no electricity and a 3-year-old who doesn't understand why the bathroom is a hole in the ground. Counselor Glubb's tentacles writhed. You deliberately deprive children of modern amenities. Well, not deprived exactly. It's good for them. Builds character. My youngest, Michael. He could start a fire with wet wood by the time he was 8. Not that we let him do it unsupervised, of course. Safety first. The next video showed humans engaged in home improvement projects. Power tools whirred, structures were demolished and rebuilt, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time destroying and reconstructing their environment. This appears to be siege preparation, General Thark observed. They're practicing structural demolition and rapid fortification construction. Maggie laughed, a sound that somehow made the aliens more nervous than if she'd growled. That's just home renovation. Quite relaxing, actually. I redid my kitchen last year. Tore out the old cabinets, replaced the countertops, installed new fixtures. The hardest part was the electrical work, but YouTube has tutorials for everything these days. You performed electrical modifications, Vexstar said faintly, without professional supervision. Oh, you just have to remember to turn off the breaker first. Common sense really. Though I did give myself quite a shock the first time I forgot. Live and learn. She held up her knitting to examine her progress. I'm making this for my grandson. He's studying engineering. Smart boy. He's designing bridges now. The final video showed humans engaged in what appeared to be recreational combat sports. 2 individuals were attempting to physically dominate each other while a crowd cheered encouragement. This is clearly warrior training, General Thark said with some relief. Finally, something that makes sense. That's just wrestling, Maggie said. Good exercise. My grandson Tommy does it at school. Keeps him out of trouble and teaches him discipline. Better than video games in my opinion. Though I must admit, I don't understand the appeal of grown men pretending to hurt each other for entertainment. But to each their own. Vexstar's crystalline form had cycled through so many colors he was starting to look like a disco ball. Ambassador O'Brien, do you not see how these activities could be interpreted as military preparation? Maggie looked genuinely puzzled. Military preparation? Oh my no. These are just life skills. Things everyone learns growing up. How else would you manage a household or raise children or take care of yourself? Other species, Counselor Glubb said carefully, typically specialize. Some individuals handle food preparation. Others handle construction. Others handle education. Well, that's fine for some folks, I suppose, Maggie said diplomatically. But what happens if the specialist isn't available? When my husband passed, I had to learn to change the oil in my car, fix the garbage disposal, and balance the checkbook. You can't just give up because something's new to you. She paused in her knitting and looked directly at each of them. I think maybe you've been overthinking this. We're not warriors or survival experts. We're just people who learned that if something needs doing, you figure out how to do it. That's not special training. That's just Tuesday. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle clicking of knitting needles and the quiet hum of life support systems. Somewhere in that silence, 3 alien minds were having a collective existential crisis about the nature of civilization itself. General Thrak was the first to break. His compound eyes focused intensely on Maggie as she continued knitting, apparently oblivious to the philosophical chaos she'd just unleashed. His mandibles clicked in what his species considered deep contemplation, but which sounded disturbingly like a carnivorous beetle planning its next meal. "Ambassador O'Brien," he said slowly, "I believe we may have reached an impasse in our classification protocols." "Oh dear," Maggie replied, glancing up from her needlework with genuine concern. "I hope I haven't said anything wrong. Sometimes I ramble. Occupational hazard of being around children for 30 years. You learn to fill silence before they fill it with chaos." Vextar's crystalline form pulsed through several rapid color changes before settling on what could only be described as bureaucratic desperation. "The issue isn't what you've said, Ambassador. It's that our entire understanding of civilized species development suggests that advanced societies specialize their populations. Warriors handle conflict, technicians handle repairs, nutritionists handle food preparation." "That does sound efficient," Maggie agreed politely. "Yet humans appear to be a species where every individual possesses what we would consider elite-level survival capabilities," Counselor Glubb added, his breathing apparatus fogging with anxiety. "This creates a classification paradox. Are you a peaceful civilian population, or are you a planet of 10 billion apex predators?" Maggie paused her knitting and gave this serious consideration. "Well, I suppose it depends on the day of the week and whether the coffee maker is working." The 3 aliens stared at her. "That was a joke," she clarified gently. "Though I am much more pleasant after my morning coffee." General Thrak leaned forward in his chair, which groaned under his armored weight. "Ambassador O'Brien, I propose we resolve this classification issue through direct observation." "Oh, that sounds interesting," Maggie said. "What did you have in mind?" "A practical demonstration. We have a testing facility on an uninhabited world in the Kepler 442 system. It's what we call a Class D survival environment. Hostile weather, limited resources, dangerous indigenous life forms. We use it to train our special forces." Vextar's form went completely transparent for a moment. "General, surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm suggesting we settle this scientifically," Thrak interrupted. "We place Ambassador O'Brien on the surface for 48 hours with minimal equipment. If she requires rescue, we'll classify humans as a protected civilian species requiring galactic oversight. If she thrives, we'll classify humans as a military threat requiring alternative diplomatic approaches." Counselor Glubb made a sound like water being sucked down a drain. "That's either going to be a humanitarian disaster or a military intelligence nightmare." "It's going to be neither," Maggie said cheerfully, setting down her knitting. "It sounds like camping. I'd be happy to participate. Though I should probably bring a few things with me. I assume this test planet doesn't have proper facilities." The casual way she said proper facilities sent chills through 3 different types of alien nervous systems. "What sort of things would you need?" Vextar asked cautiously. Maggie reached into her seemingly bottomless knitted bag and began pulling out items. "Well, let's see. I've got my emergency kit here. Duct tape, of course. You can fix anything with duct tape. Multi-tool with a good knife. Paracord. Water purification tablets. First aid supplies. Emergency blanket. Matches in a waterproof container. Energy bars. Trail mix I made myself." She continued extracting items like a magician pulling scarves from a hat. "Sewing kit. Safety pins. Dental floss. That's surprisingly useful for more than just teeth, you know. Small tarp. Compass. Emergency whistle. Hand crank flashlight. And of course my reading glasses. Can't properly identify plants without proper vision." The aliens watched in growing horror as Maggie's emergency kit expanded to fill half the conference table. "This is your emergency equipment?" General Thrak asked weakly. "Oh, this is just what I carry for day trips," Maggie explained. "If I'm going to be somewhere for 48 hours, I should probably pack properly. I'll need a change of clothes, something warmer for nighttime, maybe a small camp stove. Do you know what the local climate is like? Volcanic activity, frequent seismic events, temperatures ranging from sub-zero to 45 degrees Celsius, indigenous predators with neurotoxic venom, and atmospheric pressure that fluctuates unpredictably." General Thrak recited from memory. "So I should bring layers." Maggie nodded thoughtfully. "And maybe some antihistamine," just in case. I'm mildly allergic to some plant toxins. Makes me break out in hives. Counselor Glubb's tentacles were now pressed firmly against his breathing apparatus. You're allergic to toxins, but you're volunteering for this. Well, you can't let a little discomfort stop you from trying new things, Maggie said reasonably. Besides, it sounds educational. I've never seen a volcanic planet before. I assume there will be interesting geological formations. Vexstar was now cycling through colors that weren't supposed to exist in normal space-time. Ambassador, are you certain you understand what we're proposing? This isn't a vacation resort. This is a death world that we use to break seasoned military personnel. Oh, I understand perfectly, Maggie assured him. You want to see if I can take care of myself in challenging conditions. It's very thoughtful of you to be concerned about humanity's capabilities. Shows real galactic community spirit. She began repacking her emergency kit with practiced efficiency. When do we leave? I should probably call my daughter and let her know I'll be away for a few days. She worries if I don't check in regularly. General Thrak looked at his fellow council members. Vexstar had gone completely colorless. Counselor Glubb appeared to be hyperventilating. He himself felt like he was watching a natural disaster in slow motion. We can depart within the hour, he heard himself saying. Are you certain you don't want to reconsider? Maggie smiled at him with the same warm expression she'd probably used to reassure countless 5-year-olds that the first day of school would be fine. Oh, General, I appreciate your concern. But I raised 3 children, survived 40 years of marriage, and taught kindergarten for 3 decades. How dangerous could one little planet be? The question hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. Somewhere in the cosmic background, probability matrices began recalculating themselves, and the laws of physics started taking notes. 47 hours and 32 minutes later, the surveillance team aboard the orbiting observation vessel was experiencing what could only be described as a collective mental breakdown. The bridge was filled with the sounds of 17 different species trying to process information that violated everything they thought they knew about survival, civilization, and the basic laws of planetary ecology. Status report, General Thrak demanded, though his voice lacked its usual military authority. He'd been staring at the main screen for the better part of 2 days, watching impossible things happen in real time. Lieutenant Quex, an insectoid junior officer whose compound eyes were excellent for detail work, consulted his instruments with shaking appendages. Sir, the human subject has not only survived the testing environment, she has improved it. Define improved, Counselor Glubb whispered, his breathing apparatus working overtime. Well, sir, she's established a base camp in the thermal cave network near the primary volcanic vent. She's used the natural geothermal activity to create a heating and cooking system. The local sulfur deposits have been converted into a rudimentary water purification setup, and she's constructed what appears to be a greenhouse using salvaged materials from the abandoned monitoring station. Vexstar, who had been completely transparent for the past 6 hours, managed to flicker back into visibility. The monitoring station that was destroyed by seismic activity 3 years ago. Yes, sir, she's repurposed the debris into functional infrastructure. The metal plating is now a rainwater collection system. The broken solar panels have been wired into a lighting system for her garden? General Thrak's mandibles clicked ominously. Lieutenant Quex brought up the aerial surveillance footage. The screen showed what had once been a barren hostile landscape surrounding a network of lava tubes. Now, impossibly, there were neat rows of green plants growing in improvised planters, protected from the harsh environment by a shelter that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood both engineering and agriculture. She's managed to cultivate edible vegetation using native soil and organic matter. Our botanists are baffled. The soil composition should have been toxic to any off-world plant life. How is that possible? Vexstar asked faintly. She appears to have created a composting system using local organic debris and waste products from the indigenous life forms. The chemical analysis suggests she's managed to neutralize the soil toxicity through biological processes that our scientists didn't think were possible on this planet. Counselor Glubb made a noise like a deflating balloon. What about the indigenous predators? The acidic beetle swarms? The thermal shock lizards? Lieutenant Quex consulted another screen, his expression growing increasingly bewildered. That's where it gets really strange, sir. She's befriended them. The main display switched to ground-level camera footage. There was Maggie sitting outside her cave shelter, calmly knitting while what appeared to be a pack of 6-legged reptilian creatures lounged around her like oversized cats. The creatures' natural coloration indicated they were highly venomous, but they seemed to be in a state of complete relaxation. She's feeding them, Lieutenant Quex explained. Some kind of food preparation using native plants and what appears to be synthetic supplements from her emergency kit. The predators have established a protective perimeter around her camp. The predators are protecting her. General Thrax's voice went up several octaves. Sir, it gets worse. She's teaching them things. The footage switched to a scene that would haunt alien dreams for years to come. Maggie was patiently demonstrating to a group of the indigenous creatures how to use simple tools. One of the reptilian beings was awkwardly manipulating a stick to retrieve food from a crevice, while Maggie offered encouraging words and the occasional correction to its technique. Our xenobiologists are in complete denial, Lieutenant Quex reported. According to their models, these creatures don't have the neural capacity for tool use. Well, apparently they do now, Vexstar said hollowly. The surveillance footage continued to roll, showing 2 days of impossible accomplishments. Maggie had not only survived on a world that broke trained military personnel, she had turned it into what appeared to be a functioning homestead. She'd identified and cataloged local plant life, established sustainable food production, created a comfortable living space, and somehow convinced the local apex predators to become her gardening assistants. Sir, Lieutenant Quex added quietly. There's one more thing. She's fixed the planetary weather control system. The bridge fell silent except for the humming of instruments and Counselor Glubb's increasingly rapid breathing. The system that's been malfunctioning for 50 years, General Thrax asked. Yes, sir. She located the primary control node in the northern cave system, and performed what she called basic maintenance. According to her transmitted notes, it just needed the alien equivalent of turning it off and on again, plus some percussive maintenance and a liberal application of duct tape. The weather patterns on the planet below were indeed stabilizing for the first time in half a century. The volcanic activity was settling into predictable cycles. The atmospheric pressure had normalized. Even the local wildlife seemed calmer and more organized. She's turned a deathworld into a nature preserve, Vexstar said in wonder and horror. In less than 48 hours, Counselor Glubb added. Using basic camping supplies and common sense, General Thrax finished. The bridge crew watched as Maggie emerged from her cave shelter, stretched in the alien sunshine, and began what appeared to be morning calisthenics while the indigenous predators gathered around her in a protective circle. She looked remarkably refreshed for someone who had just spent 2 days on a planet that was supposed to kill her. Sir, Lieutenant Quex said hesitantly. She's requesting permission to extend her stay. She says she's found some interesting mineral deposits and would like to do some geological surveys. She also mentions that the local wildlife might benefit from a more structured feeding program. General Thrax stared at the screen where a 68-year-old human grandmother was apparently establishing a wildlife rehabilitation center on a world that had been specifically designated as too dangerous for any form of colonization. Abort the test, he said quietly. Get her off that planet before she domesticates anything else. But even as the retrieval shuttle launched, all 3 council members knew that the real test was over. They had their answer. The problem wasn't classifying humans as either civilians or predators. The problem was that humans had made that distinction completely meaningless. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened for what would later be remembered as the Great Reclassification Session of 2387. The chamber had been expanded to accommodate representatives from 47 different species, all of whom had heard rumors about the human incident and wanted to witness the taxonomic chaos firsthand. Vexstar stood at the central podium, his crystalline form cycling through colors that had no names in any known language. In his appendages, he held a data tablet containing the new classification protocols that had taken 3 weeks, 17 xenobiologists, 4 military strategists, and 2 philosophers to draft. Esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen the fundamental structure of the universe rearranged by a grandmother with a knitting bag. We are here to ratify the creation of a new species classification. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Creating new classifications was serious business. The current system had been in use for millennia. After extensive observation, analysis, and what I can only describe as existential counseling, Vexstar continued. We have concluded that humans cannot be classified using our existing parameters. They are simultaneously the galaxy's most helpful neighbors and most dangerous creatures, depending entirely on whether you treat them nicely. Ambassador Flakes of the Silicon Collective raised a crystalline appendage. Surely you're being hyperbolic, Ambassador Vexstar. I wish I were, Vexstar replied sadly. The human representative turned our most challenging survival environment into a functioning agricultural commune in less than 2 days. She befriended apex predators, taught them tool use, and repaired a planetary climate control system that our best engineers had given up on. Using what resources? Demanded General Zavak of the Warrior Caste Union. Duct tape, Vexstar said simply. And what she called common sense. The chamber erupted in 17 different forms of confused chittering, whistling, and electromagnetic humming. Furthermore, Vexstar continued once order was restored. Our psychological profiles indicate that she does not consider herself exceptional in any way. According to her testimony, these capabilities are standard among her species. She referred to her accomplishments as basic life skills and expressed concern that we might be overthinking the situation. Counselor Glubb, who had spent the past 3 weeks in intensive therapy, managed to add, she also invited us all to something called a potluck dinner and suggested we might enjoy roughing it on a camping trip. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Therefore, Vextar announced, we are creating classification code 77 Alpha, humans handle with care. This designation recognizes that while humans pose no direct threat to galactic peace, they possess an alarming tendency to accidentally solve problems that have baffled our greatest minds, usually while attempting to perform what they consider routine maintenance. He consulted his notes, which were extensive and color-coded for trauma level. Subsection A covers their propensity for befriending dangerous wildlife. Subsection B addresses their ability to create functional technology from debris. Subsection C deals with their disturbing habit of treating survival scenarios as recreational activities. What about diplomatic protocols? Asked Representative Yith of the Gaseous Consortium. We're recommending a policy of cautious friendship, General Thrak interjected, his mandibles clicking nervously. Based on observed behavior, humans respond positively to courtesy, shared meals, and what they call neighborly cooperation. They respond negatively to threats, bureaucratic inefficiency, and rudeness. How negatively? Yith inquired. We'd rather not find out, Thrak admitted. Their ability to turn hostile environments into comfortable living spaces suggests that they might be equally capable of turning comfortable living spaces into hostile environments. We prefer not to test this hypothesis. So we're being nice to them because they're too dangerous to be mean to? Ambassador Flakes asked. We're being nice to them because they're too helpful to be mean to, Vextar corrected. There's a significant difference. Our preliminary analysis suggests that humans operate on a reciprocal social system. They're extraordinarily generous with assistance and resources, but they expect basic courtesy in return. The chamber doors opened, and Maggie O'Brien entered, carrying what appeared to be several covered dishes, and trailing the aroma of something that made every life form present suddenly hungry, regardless of their dietary requirements. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said cheerfully. But I thought you might be getting peckish. Council sessions can run long. I brought some casseroles and a nice salad, nothing fancy, just comfort food. She began setting up what appeared to be a buffet table with the efficient movements of someone who had organized countless church socials and school events. I also brought plates and utensils. I wasn't sure what dietary requirements everyone had, so I made several options. The green casserole is entirely plant-based, the blue one is synthetic proteins, and the traditional one is, well, traditional. The assembled delegates stared in fascination as she transformed a corner of the formal council chamber into a welcoming dining area. It was a master class in hospitality that made their own diplomatic protocols look stiff and unwelcoming by comparison. Oh, and I've been thinking about your classification problem, Maggie added casually while arranging napkins. You're making it too complicated. You don't need to classify humans as dangerous or harmless. Just think of us as neighbors. Good neighbors help when you need it, bring food when you're having a hard time, and fix things that are broken. Bad neighbors. Well, bad neighbors cause problems. She straightened up and smiled at the assembly. The trick is being a good neighbor yourself. It's really quite simple. Vextar felt his crystalline matrix reorganizing itself around this profoundly simple concept. So our diplomatic approach should be friendly, be helpful, and don't be a jerk. Maggie said matter-of-factly. Works in any galaxy. General Thrak found himself nodding. And if we need assistance with a problem, just ask nicely. Most folks are happy to help if you ask politely and don't make unreasonable demands. Maggie gestured toward the food. Now, who's hungry? I made enough for everyone, and food always tastes better when it's shared. As the various species began tentatively approaching the buffet, Vextar made one final note in the official record. Humans classification 77 Alpha. Handle with care, but more importantly, handle with kindness. Recommend immediate implementation of reciprocal neighborly relations. Also recommend learning to make casseroles. At the bottom of the page, in smaller text he added, note, do not underestimate their grandmothers, ever. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to accept the new classification. It was the first unanimous vote in the Council's 3,000-year history, though this may have been influenced by the fact that everyone was too busy enjoying Maggie's cooking to argue. Later that evening, as delegates from across the galaxy shared a meal and discovered that conversation flowed much more easily over comfort food, Counselor Glubb made an observation that would become a cornerstone of interspecies relations. Perhaps the secret to galactic peace isn't complex diplomatic protocols. Perhaps it's just remembering to bring enough food for everyone. Maggie, who was already planning a galaxy-wide potluck event, simply smiled and began collecting the empty dishes. After all, good neighbors always cleaned up after themselves.